The winter of 1885 gripped Montana territory with merciless intensity, but it wasn't the bitter cold that brought Zara Ellis to her knees in the snow-covered pasture of Rocking K Ranch. It was the desperate bellowing of a heifer in distress. Blood stained the pristine white powder beneath her gloved hands as she knelt beside the struggling animal, her breath forming thick clouds in the frigid air. She had never delivered a calf before, but with no one else around for miles, the schoolteacher turned her gaze to the darkening sky and steeled herself for what had to be done. "Easy, girl," Zara whispered, stroking the heifer's trembling flank. "We're going to get through this together." The snow had been falling steadily since noon, accumulating over the rolling hills surrounding the small town of Copper Creek, Montana. Zara had been on her way back from visiting a student's home when the blizzard intensified, forcing her to seek shelter at the nearest property. The Rocking K Ranch had appeared through the curtain of white like an answer to her prayers. But when she arrived, she found the ranch house empty and the desperate sounds of labor coming from the nearby cattle pen. Zara removed her heavy coat despite the cold, rolled up her sleeves, and began to assess the situation. The heifer was young, likely experiencing her first birth and clearly struggling. The calf was positioned wrong. Zara could tell that much from the little knowledge she had gleaned from books and conversations with the local ranchers' wives. "Miss, what in tarnation are you doing out here?" The deep voice startled her, and Zara whirled around to see a tall figure trudging through the snow toward her. As he drew closer, she recognized him as Hank Keller, the owner of the Rocking K. She'd seen him in town occasionally, a quiet man who kept to himself, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a reputation as one of the hardest-working ranchers in the territory. "Mr. Keller," she called out, relief washing over her. "This heifer is in trouble. The calf is breech, I think." Hank Keller quickened his pace, reaching her side in seconds. His weathered face registered surprise at finding the town's schoolteacher kneeling in his cattle pen. "Miss Ellis, you shouldn't be out in this weather." His eyes shifted to the distressed animal. "Damn it all, Buttercup's early." Was checking the north pasture when the storm hit. Without another word, Hank knelt beside her in the snow. "You have experience with calving?" Zara shook her head. "Only what I've read, but I couldn't just leave her." A look of respect flickered across his features. "Well, you're right about the breech. We need to turn the calf or we'll lose them both." He glanced at her fine dress, now soiled with mud and blood. "This is no job for a schoolteacher, Miss Ellis. You can wait in the house." Zara straightened her back. "I'm already here, Mr. Keller." "Tell me what to do." The rancher hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Roll your sleeves higher and follow my instructions exactly." For the next hour, they worked together in perfect synchronicity. Hank guided her hands with gentle words, teaching her how to reach inside the heifer to find the calf's legs and carefully reposition the unborn animal. The cold numbed Zara's fingers, but she persisted, her determination matching Hank's own. "You're doing fine," he encouraged as Zara's arms trembled from exertion. "Just a little more." Finally, with one last effort, they managed to turn the calf. Buttercup pushed with renewed strength, and soon a wet, slippery calf slid into the world, landing in Zara's waiting arms. "It's a heifer." She cried out, joy overcoming her exhaustion. Hank quickly cleared the newborn's airways and helped Zara place the calf near its mother's head. Buttercup immediately began to lick her baby, a good sign that the bond was forming properly. "We need to make sure she stands and nurses soon," Hank explained, his voice softer than Zara had ever heard it. "Otherwise, she might not make it through the night." They worked together to dry the calf with clean rags Hank produced from a nearby shed. The blizzard continued to rage around them, but within the shelter of the pen, a miracle of life had occurred, warming them despite the freezing temperature. After ensuring the calf was nursing properly, Hank turned to Zara, really looking at her for perhaps the first time. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins, framing a face flushed with cold and exertion. Her dress was ruined, her hands raw from cold and work, yet her eyes shone with a fierce satisfaction that stirred something long dormant within him. "You're stronger than any ranch hand I've ever worked with, Miss Ellis," he said quietly, genuine admiration in his voice. "Not many would have stopped, let alone stayed to help. Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "I couldn't have done it without your guidance, Mr. Keller." "Hank," he corrected her, a rare smile softening the hard lines of his face. "After what we just went through together, I reckon we can use first names." "Zara," she offered in return, suddenly very aware of how close they were standing. The moment was interrupted by another bellow from across the pen. Hank's head snapped up. "Another one starting. This storm has them spooked sometimes that can trigger early labor." "Show me what to do," Zara said without hesitation, already moving toward the sound. Hank looked at her with something like wonder. "You sure about this? You've already done more than enough." Zara met his gaze steadily. "I'm sure." As the blizzard howled outside, they moved from cow to cow, delivering 3 more calves before the worst of the storm passed. By the time the last calf was nursing contentedly, Zara could barely feel her fingers, and even Hank, accustomed to the harsh Montana winters, was shivering. "We need to get you warmed up," he said, concern evident in his voice. "The ranch house isn't far." Zara nodded, suddenly aware of how bone-tired she was. "What about the calves? They'll be fine with their mothers now. I'll check on them again after I get you settled." He hesitated before adding, "You saved at least 2 of those calves tonight, maybe more. I won't forget it." The walk to the ranch house seemed endless through the knee-deep snow. When they finally reached the porch, Hank had to practically carry Zara up the steps, her legs numb from cold and exhaustion. Inside, he quickly built up the fire in the hearth while Zara stood shivering near the flames. "I have some clothes that might fit you," Hank said, disappearing into another room. He returned with a flannel shirt and a pair of trousers. "They belonged to my sister when she used to visit. You need to get out of those wet things before you catch your death." He turned his back discreetly while Zara changed behind a screen in the corner of the room. When she emerged, the oversized clothes hanging on her slender frame, Hank had prepared coffee and was laying out bread and cold meat on the table. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll warm you up." "It's perfect," Zara assured him, taking a seat at the rough-hewn table. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Hank spoke again. "What brought you out this way in such weather, Miss Ellis?" Zara. She explained about visiting the Thompsons' young son who had been too ill to attend school. "I was on my way back when the storm worsened. I saw your ranch and thought I might wait it out here. Lucky for me and my cattle that you did," Hank said with a genuine smile. "Though I reckon your reputation in town might suffer if folks knew you spent the night alone with the likes of me." Zara laughed softly. "I think saving calves gives us a reasonable excuse. Besides, I've never much cared for small-town gossip." As the night deepened around them, they talked more freely than either had done in years. Hank told her about inheriting the ranch from his father 5 years ago and his struggle to make it profitable on his own. Zara shared stories of her journey west from Boston to take the teaching position in Copper Creek after the death of her parents left her alone in the world. "It's not easy being on your own," Hank observed, refilling her coffee cup. "This country can be unforgiving." "Yes," Zara agreed, "but it can also offer second chances. That's why I came west." Their eyes met across the table, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Something shifted in the atmosphere of the room, a recognition of kindred spirits discovering each other against all odds. The moment was broken by a gust of wind that rattled the windows. Hank stood up. "I should check on the calves again. The storm's letting up some." "I'll come with you," Zara said, already rising from her chair. Hank looked as if he might protest, but then simply nodded. They bundled up again and ventured back into the night, moving from pen to pen to ensure all the newborns were faring well. To Zara's delight, all 4 calves were nursing and alert, their mothers watchful and protective. "They're beautiful," she said, watching one calf take its first wobbly steps. "They are," Hank agreed, but when Zara glanced up, she found him looking not at the calves but at her. By the time they returned to the house, exhaustion had overtaken them both. Hank insisted Zara take his bed while he slept on a pallet by the fire. Too tired to argue, she accepted his offer with grateful thanks, falling asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. Morning brought clear skies and a transformed landscape. The world outside the window was a pristine white expanse, beautiful in its starkness. Zara found Hank already awake, preparing a simple breakfast of flapjacks and coffee. "I need to get back to town," she said reluctantly. "They'll be worried about me." Hank nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'll hitch up the sleigh and take you. The roads will be impassable for a regular wagon." The journey to Copper Creek was like traveling through a dream world. The sleigh slid smoothly over the packed snow, the horse's breath forming clouds in the bright morning air. Zara found herself wishing the journey would never end, that they could continue gliding through this white silence forever. All too soon, the buildings of Copper Creek came into view. Hank guided the sleigh to the boarding house, where Zara rented a room. "Thank you," she said as they pulled to a stop, "for everything." Hank's gaze held hers for a long moment. "No, Miss Ellis, thank you. I won't forget what you did last night." She nodded, suddenly finding it difficult to speak. As she climbed down from the sleigh, Mrs. Peterson, the boarding house owner, rushed out onto the porch. "Zara Ellis, we've been worried sick about you. Where on earth have you been?" Before Zara could answer, Hank tipped his hat to Mrs. Peterson. "Miss Ellis helped deliver 4 calves at my ranch during the blizzard last night, madam. She saved my stock and probably my livelihood. She's the bravest woman I've ever met." Mrs. Peterson's mouth formed a perfect O of surprise. Zara felt a blush creep up her cheeks as Hank flicked the reins and the sleigh pulled away. "Well, I never," Mrs. Peterson muttered, ushering Zara inside. "You certainly have some explaining to do, young lady." News of Zara's night at the Rocking K spread through Copper Creek with predictable speed. By Monday morning, when she returned to the schoolhouse, the children were full of questions about delivering calves and spending the night at the mysterious Mr. Keller's ranch. "Did you have to put your whole arm inside the cow, Miss Ellis?" asked Tommy Jenkins with ghoulish enthusiasm. "Is it true Mr. Keller never talks to nobody except his horses?" wondered Sally Thompson. Zara answered their questions with patience and discretion, turning the experience into an impromptu lesson on animal husbandry and the importance of helping neighbors in times of need. By the end of the day, the initial sensation had begun to fade, replaced by genuine respect for what she had done. A week passed before Zara saw Hank again. She was leaving the general store when his tall figure appeared before her on the boardwalk. "Miss Ellis," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I was hoping I might find you in town today, Mr. Keller," she returned with a smile. "How are the calves?" "Growing stronger every day," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "And their mothers are doing well too." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Hank cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might consider coming out to the ranch on Saturday. The Thompsons are bringing their boy for a visit. Thought seeing the calves might cheer him up after his illness. I'd appreciate it if you were there to help explain things to him, being a teacher and all." Zara recognized the invitation for what it was, an excuse to see her again without raising eyebrows. "I'd be delighted," she said simply. Saturday dawned bright and clear, the recent snow beginning to melt under the strengthening spring sun. Zara found herself taking extra care with her appearance, selecting a blue dress that matched her eyes and arranging her auburn hair more carefully than usual. The Thompson family picked her up in their wagon, young Billy chattering excitedly about seeing the new calves. His parents exchanged knowing glances when Zara mentioned that Mr. Keller had specifically requested her presence, but they made no comment. Approaching the Rocking K in daylight was a very different experience from stumbling upon it in a blizzard. Zara could now appreciate the neat layout of the buildings, the well-maintained corrals, and the stunning backdrop of mountains in the distance. Hank Keller might be a solitary man, but his ranch reflected care and attention to detail. Hank himself emerged from the barn as they arrived, looking more approachable than Zara had ever seen him in town. He was clean-shaven, his usually unruly dark hair tamed somewhat, and he wore a fresh shirt under his worn leather vest. "Welcome to the Rocking K," he said, helping Mrs. Thompson down from the wagon before turning to offer his hand to Zara. Their fingers lingered together a moment longer than necessary, and Zara felt that same inexplicable warmth spread through her chest. The afternoon passed pleasantly as they showed young Billy the calves, now steady on their feet and full of energy. Hank revealed a surprising gentleness with the boy, patiently answering his endless questions and even letting him help with feeding the smallest calf. "You're good with children," Zara observed quietly as they stood watching Billy giggle at the calf's rough tongue on his hand. Hank shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "Never had much chance to be around them, but I like his curiosity. Reminds me of myself at that age, always wanting to know how things worked." "Is that why you became a rancher?" "Partly," he admitted. "My father was a rancher and his father before him. It's in my blood, I suppose, but I also love the freedom of it, being my own boss, watching things grow and thrive under my care." He glanced at her. "What about you? Why teaching?" Zara smiled, watching Billy's delight. For moments like this, seeing someone discover something new about the world, it's like watching a light go on inside them. They shared a look of perfect understanding, two people dedicated to nurturing growth in their own ways. After the Thompsons departed, promising to bring Billy back to check on his calf, Hank surprised Zara by asking if she would stay for supper. "I'm not much of a cook," he warned, "but I can manage a decent stew." "I'd like that," Zara said, pleased by the invitation. As they prepared the meal together in the ranch house kitchen, Zara found herself relaxing in Hank's company in a way she rarely did with others. There was something about his quiet, straightforward nature that put her at ease. Over supper, Hank spoke more openly about his life. "I was married once briefly," he revealed, surprising her. "She was a city girl from Helena who thought she wanted ranch life. Turned out she was wrong." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. Hank shook his head. "It was years ago. She's happier now, I hear, married to a banker in Bozeman. And I learned something important. It takes a special kind of woman to thrive out here." His eyes met hers across the table, the implication hanging in the air between them. "And you?" he asked. "No suitors waiting back in Boston," Zara laughed lightly. "None that I regretted leaving behind. My parents had hopes for a match with a family friend, but he was more in love with my father's library than with me. When they died, I saw no reason to stay." "Their loss," Hank said simply. "Copper Creek's gain." The sun was setting when Hank hitched his horse to the buggy to drive Zara back to town. The journey passed too quickly, the conversation flowing easily between them now. As they reached the boarding house, Hank helped her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Thank you for today," she said, reluctant to say goodbye. "There's a social at the church next Saturday," Hank said abruptly. "I don't usually attend such things, but if you were going—" "I'll be there," Zara promised, her heart lifting. The week dragged by with painful slowness. Zara threw herself into her teaching, but her thoughts constantly drifted to the rocking K and its solitary owner. Several times, she caught herself daydreaming in the middle of lessons, earning curious looks from her students. By Saturday, anticipation had built to such a pitch that she could barely eat breakfast. She spent an unreasonable amount of time preparing for the social, trying on every dress she owned, before settling on a deep green one that Mrs. Peterson assured her brought out the fire in her auburn hair. The church hall was decorated with spring flowers and lit with dozens of lanterns when Zara arrived. She scanned the crowd anxiously, disappointed when she didn't immediately see Hank's tall figure. Had he changed his mind, looking for someone in particular, Miss Ellis? The familiar deep voice behind her sent a thrill down her spine. Zara turned to find Hank standing there, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his Sunday best, hat in hand. "You came," she said, unable to hide her pleasure. "I said I would," he replied simply, offering his arm. "May I get you some punch?" The evening passed in a pleasant blur. Hank was not much of a dancer, but he made an effort for Zara's sake, joining in for a couple of slow waltzes. They attracted curious glances. The reserved rancher and the schoolteacher were an unexpected pairing, but Zara found she didn't care in the slightest what anyone thought. During a break in the music, they stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear, stars scattered across the Montana sky like diamond dust. "Beautiful," Zara murmured, gazing upward. "Yes," Hank agreed, but when she glanced at him, he was looking at her, not the stars. Their eyes held for a long moment before Hank slowly, deliberately, leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Zara found herself responding, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. When they finally separated, Hank's expression was a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. "I've been wanting to do that since the night of the blizzard," he confessed. "I've been hoping you would," Zara admitted with a smile. The weeks that followed were the happiest Zara had ever known. With the arrival of spring, the rocking K burst into life, calves frolicking in green pastures, wildflowers dotting the hills, and the days growing longer and warmer. Zara spent every weekend at the ranch, learning its rhythms and routines. Hank proved to be a patient teacher, showing her how to ride properly, tend the vegetable garden, and even handle the gentle mare he gave her for her exclusive use. In return, Zara brought books from the schoolhouse, reading aloud to Hank in the evenings as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Their courtship was the talk of Copper Creek, of course. Some approved Miss Ellis was bringing the reclusive Hank Keller back into the community. Others were less enthusiastic. A schoolteacher should set a better example than to spend so much time unchaperoned at a bachelor's ranch. Zara paid the gossip no mind. For the first time in her life, she had found someone who valued her strength as well as her gentleness, who saw her as an equal partner rather than a decorative accessory. As spring gave way to summer, Zara found herself dreaming of a future at the rocking K. She imagined waking up each morning to the view of mountains from Hank's bedroom window, teaching at the school during the week, and helping with the ranch on weekends and holidays. It was a life she had never envisioned for herself, but now couldn't imagine living without. The opportunity to broach the subject came unexpectedly on a hot July afternoon. Zara had arrived at the ranch to find Hank in a state of barely controlled panic. One of his best mares was in labor, but something was wrong. The foal's positioned wrong, just like Buttercup's calf was, he explained tersely as they hurried to the barn. But a horse is different, there's less room to maneuver. For hours, they worked together to save the mare and her foal. Zara's smaller hands proved crucial, able to reach in and help reposition the foal when Hank's couldn't. By the time the exhausted mare finally delivered a healthy filly, the sun was setting, and both Hank and Zara were drenched in sweat and trembling with fatigue. "We did it," Zara whispered, watching the wobbly foal take its first tentative steps toward its mother. Hank didn't respond immediately. When Zara looked up, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "What is it?" she asked. "Is something wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "Nothing's wrong. I was just thinking how right you are here, Zara, how right we are together." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn velvet box. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. Maybe this is it covered in dirt and who knows what else, but saving something precious together." Zara's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "This was my mother's," Hank said, his voice rough with emotion. "She made me promise I'd only give it to someone as strong and kind as she was. I didn't think such a woman existed until you appeared in my cattle pen that night." He took her hand, heedless of the dirt under her nails. "Zara Ellis, will you marry me? Will you make the rocking K your home and me the happiest man in Montana territory?" Tears blurred Zara's vision as she nodded, unable to form words for a moment. Finally, she managed a whispered, "Yes, Hank, yes to all of it." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her hand. Hank pulled her close, his kiss far less tentative than their first one had been, full of promise and passion. "When?" he asked simply when they finally broke apart. "As soon as possible," Zara replied without hesitation. "I don't want to waste another day not being your wife." They were married 2 weeks later in the same church hall where they had danced at the social. The entire town turned out for the event. Even those who had disapproved of their courtship couldn't resist witnessing the union of the schoolteacher and the rancher. Young Billy Thompson proudly served as ring bearer, while his mother stood as Zara's matron of honor. After a brief honeymoon in Helena, they returned to begin their life together at the rocking K. The school board had reluctantly accepted Zara's resignation, though she promised to stay on until they found a replacement. In the meantime, She divided her time between teaching and helping Hank prepare for the coming winter. Their first major test as a married couple came in late October, when an early blizzard swept across the territory without warning. Zara and Hank worked side by side to secure the ranch, bringing vulnerable stock into the barns and ensuring adequate feed was accessible. As they huddled together before the fire that night, exhausted but satisfied that they had done everything possible to protect their animals, Zara realized she had never felt so fulfilled or so loved. "A penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Keller," Hank said, stroking her hair. The name still gave her a thrill of happiness. "I was just thinking how fortunate I am that I got caught in that blizzard last winter." "I'm the fortunate one," Hank corrected her, pulling her closer. "You could have passed by, left the heifer to her fate. Instead, you stopped. You cared." "I've always believed that the measure of a person is what they do when no one is watching," Zara said softly. "Well, I was watching," Hank reminded her with a smile, "and I saw a woman stronger than any ranch hand with a heart big enough to match that strength." As winter settled over the rocking K, Zara and Hank established routines that blended their separate lives into a harmonious whole. Mornings began before dawn with coffee by the fire before Hank headed out to tend the stock. Zara would prepare breakfast and then either head to town for her teaching duties, or, if school was canceled due to weather, work on household tasks and record-keeping for the ranch. Evenings were their special time when they would share the events of their day over supper before retiring to the cozy parlor. Sometimes they read together, Zara's clear voice bringing books to life for Hank. Other times they simply talked, making plans for the ranch's future or reminiscing about their childhoods. By December, Zara had another piece of news to share. She had suspected for several weeks but wanted to be certain before telling Hank. She chose a quiet Sunday evening when they were relaxing before the fire. Hank was whittling a piece of wood, a hobby she had discovered he enjoyed during the winter months, while she pretended to focus on her mending. "Hank," she began, setting aside her sewing. "Do you remember how you once said you wanted to see things grow and thrive under your care?" He looked up, a quizzical expression on his face. "I recall something like that, yes." "Well," Zara said, unable to keep the smile from her lips, "I believe we'll have something new growing and thriving here at the Rocking K come summer." For a moment, Hank looked puzzled, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Zara, are you saying?" She nodded, her hand moving instinctively to rest on her still flat stomach. "Dr. Morrison confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Hank." The whittling knife and piece of wood fell forgotten to the floor as Hank crossed to her in 2 long strides, gathering her into his arms. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." As he held her, Zara felt his shoulders shake slightly and realized with surprise that her strong, stoic husband was crying. She had never seen him shed tears, not even during their wedding. "Are you happy?" she asked softly, though she already knew the answer. "Happier than I ever thought possible," he whispered against her hair. "You've given me everything, Zara, everything that matters in this life." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Hank's hand protective over her abdomen, Zara reflected on the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. If the blizzard hadn't struck, if she had chosen a different path back to town, if she had ignored the struggling heifer, any small change might have resulted in a completely different life. "What are you thinking about now?" Hank murmured sleepily. "How grateful I am for that snowstorm," she replied honestly. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest beneath her ear. "I've never heard anyone express gratitude for a Montana blizzard before." "Well, it brought me to you," Zara pointed out. "And now here we are, creating a family together." "A family," Hank repeated, wonder in his voice. "I never thought I'd have one of my own." "Get used to the idea, Mr. Keller," Zara teased gently. "In about 6 months, this house is going to be filled with baby cries and tiny footsteps." "I can't wait," he said sincerely, tightening his arms around her. As her pregnancy progressed, Zara continued teaching as long as possible. The school board had found a replacement, a young woman from St. Louis who would arrive in the spring, but until then, Copper Creek's children still needed their education. The townsfolk watched Zara's changing figure with knowing smiles. Several of the ranchers' wives organized a quilting bee to create a baby blanket, and Mrs. Peterson knitted tiny booties and caps in both blue and pink, just to be prepared. Hank became even more protective, insisting on driving Zara to and from school each day regardless of the weather. He hired additional help around the ranch, determined that Zara should not strain herself with chores. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she reminded him more than once, but secretly she was touched by his concern. The winter passed into spring, bringing new life to the rocking K once again. Calves and foals appeared in the pastures, and the garden Zara had expanded the previous summer began to sprout green shoots. As her own body grew rounder with their child, Zara found herself more attuned than ever to the cycles of nature around her. In late May, just as Zara was preparing to officially hand over her teaching duties to the new schoolmistress, she experienced her first contraction while writing on the blackboard. She managed to finish the school day, not wanting to alarm her students, but by the time Hank arrived to drive her home, she knew their baby was on the way. "It's too early," he protested, his face pale with worry as he helped her into the wagon. "Only by a few weeks," Zara assured him, wincing as another contraction tightened her abdomen. "Babies come when they're ready, not according to our schedules." The journey back to the ranch seemed interminable, each bump in the road causing Zara to grip the seat until her knuckles whitened. By the time they arrived, the contractions were coming regularly, and Hank was nearly frantic. "I'll ride for the doctor," he said as he carried her into the house. Zara caught his arm. "There's no time, Hank. This baby is coming fast." "But I don't know what to do," he protested, real fear in his eyes. Zara managed a smile through her pain. "Yes, you do. You've delivered countless calves and foals. The principle is the same. This is different," he insisted. "This is you and our child." She squeezed his hand. "And there's no one I trust more to help bring our baby into the world." Something in her words seemed to steady him. Hank took a deep breath and nodded, his expression shifting from panic to determination. "All right, tell me what you need." For the next few hours, they worked together one last time as a childless couple, preparing for the new life that would change everything. Hank brought clean linens and water, helped Zara change into a nightgown, and positioned her comfortably on their bed. As the labor intensified, Zara found strength in Hank's unwavering presence. He wiped her brow, encouraged her through each contraction, and reminded her to breathe when the pain became overwhelming. "You can do this," he told her repeatedly. "You're the strongest woman I know, Zara Keller." Just as the sun was setting, casting golden light through the bedroom window, their daughter entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to both her parents' eyes. "She's perfect," Hank whispered, carefully placing the swaddled infant in Zara's arms after cleaning and examining her. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and your auburn hair." Zara gazed down at their child, overwhelmed by a love more powerful than anything she had ever experienced. "Hello, little one," she murmured. "We've been waiting for you. What shall we call her?" Hank asked, perching carefully on the edge of the bed, his finger captured in the baby's tiny but surprisingly strong grip. Zara considered for a moment. "Hope," she decided, "because that's what she is, our hope for the future." "Hope Keller." Hank tested the name and nodded his approval. "It suits her." As the new family settled in together, Dr. Morrison finally arrived, having been delayed by another birth in town. He examined both mother and child, pronouncing them healthy and complimenting Hank on his midwifery skills. "You've got a natural talent, Keller," the doctor said with a chuckle. "Maybe you missed your calling." Hank shook his head, gazing at his wife and daughter with undisguised adoration. "No, I found exactly the calling I was meant for." The years that followed brought changes to the rocking K. With Zara's educational background and Hank's ranching knowledge, they expanded operations, adding more cattle and introducing better breeding stock. Their reputation grew throughout Montana territory for the quality of their animals and the fair dealing of the owners. Hope grew into a spirited child with her mother's auburn hair and her father's stormy gray eyes. She was joined 2 years later by a brother, Samuel, who inherited Hank's height and Zara's love of books. The ranch house expanded as well, with new rooms added to accommodate the growing family. and the library Hank insisted on building for Zara when she expressed missing her teaching work. Eventually, that library became the setting for informal lessons for Hope, Samuel, and the children of neighboring ranches too far from town to attend the school regularly. Through it all the harsh winters and bountiful summers, the good years and the lean ones, the joys of watching their children grow, and the inevitable sorrows that life brings, Hank and Zara remained partners in the truest sense. Their love, born in a blizzard and tempered through shared challenges, only deepened with time. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Hank surprised Zara by taking her to the exact spot in the cattle pen where they had first worked together to deliver Buttercup's calf. The pen was empty now, the animals out grazing in the summer pastures, but the memories remained vivid. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Hank asked, taking her hand in his. Zara smiled up at the man who had been her husband, partner, and best friend for a decade. "Sometimes. But then I remember that some things are simply meant to be. I believe we would have found each other somehow." Hank pulled her close, his arms as strong and secure as they had been on that first night. "You're probably right. After all, how could I not fall in love with a woman stronger than any ranch hand? And how could I resist a man who noticed that strength instead of being threatened by it?" Zara returned, resting her head against his chest. As they walked back to the house hand in hand, they could see Hope and Samuel playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the clear Montana air. The rocking K spread out around them, the results of their shared vision and hard work evident in the well-maintained buildings, the fat cattle in the pastures, and the general air of prosperity that had replaced the struggling ranch Hank had inherited. "We built something good here," Hank said quietly, pride evident in his voice. "Yes," Zara agreed, squeezing his hand, "something very good indeed." That evening, after the children were asleep, they sat together on the porch swing Hank had built the previous summer, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. The air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "I have something to tell you," Zara said after a comfortable silence. "Something I've suspected for a few weeks now." Hank turned to her, eyebrows raised in question. "It seems our family is going to grow again," she said, her smile radiant in the fading light. "By next spring, Hope and Samuel will have a new brother or sister." Joy spread across Hank's features, as unrestrained as it had been the first time she'd shared such news. "Really? Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without the doctor's confirmation," Zara assured him. Hank pulled her into his arms, his kiss tender and full of promise. When they finally separated, he kept his forehead pressed to hers, his voice soft with emotion. "After all these years, you still amaze me, Zara Keller. As you do me," she whispered back. "Every single day." As the night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking quietly about the future, making plans for the new baby, and reminiscing about the decade they had shared. The rocking K slept peacefully around them, a testament to what could be built when two people with strength, vision, and love joined their lives together. And it had all begun on a bitter winter night when a schoolteacher, caught in a blizzard, had stopped to help a struggling heifer and found not just shelter from the storm, but a love that would warm her for the rest of her days.